Oh, Raider Nation. Oh, welcome to Silver and Black today, the post-game edition. The Raiders, in unbelievable fashion, end their three-game winning streak in a last-second 17-16 loss in Los Angeles to the Rams, and Baker Mayfield, 2 days off the plane, leads them on a winning drive where the Raiders help out the Rams with penalties galore. And it's just a tough night in Raider Nation. We're here to talk about the game. This is Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. If you don't subscribe to the podcast, please do. I know you probably won't want to talk about Raider football tomorrow, but we will for the rest of the season. And you guys are ride or die, so I expect you to. We certainly appreciate you being with us. And always on this post-game show, I have my voice of the fan, our voice of the fan here. That, of course, is Murf from Raiders Fan Radio. He's putting a bag on his head. Mo, along with my co-host, Moe Moton. He's the national NFL writer at Bleacher Report, as well as the Raiders columnist at sportsnot.com. All right, gentlemen, there's so many things to talk about. The one thing I want to say up front, and Murph, I want to get your comment, as we always do at the top of this show with Voice of the Fan, is this. Not one person was responsible for this loss. There's lots of blame to go around, including the head coach, the play caller. I mean, there's so many things we're going to talk about tonight, but I want to get your reaction, Murph, to this game, how it unfolded, and how it felt a lot like the first 7-8 games of the year after the last 3 weeks where things were really looking up.
Fell apart as soon as Josh Jacobs got hurt. I mean, it wasn't going well, towards the latter half of the game, but it seems like there was some momentum that got stolen and got robbed when it was like, clearly the guy had been carrying us all year long, literally and figuratively. And so there was something about that, the moment, like we've been praising the Raiders for their body language, the enthusiasm, the things that they've been rallying around during this 3-game win streak. And as soon as Josh Jacobs got dinged up, then all of a sudden, like, it completely evaporated. The emotion went out of the place. I mean, this was a home game for the Raiders. We have friends that were there at the game, as I'm sure many of you did. And, it was a freaking blackout. It was a Raider home game. And to not take that momentum and that energy and to not focus that. And I mean, unless I podcast for a living, just like you guys do too. Well, I'm podcast for a living, but I podcast a lot. And I'm speechless. I sat on my couch just in dumbfounded freaking silence for 10 minutes before I could utter out anything, because it was so shocking the way that the Raiders completely collapsed on themselves. And like you said, Scott, the multitude of ways, coaching wise, defensively, we fell apart. What the hell happened offensively, we fell apart. Mo, say something cool, because I got nothing.
And Mo, yeah, I want to talk about this because I had an interesting night on Twitter. I started praising Derek Carr. The throws to Davante Adams were amazing. He started off hot. Davante Adams started off good, and then everything seemed to just shut down. The play calling definitely suspect. And then you had the slew of penalties. You had the inability to score in the red zone again, or to convert on 7 points versus 3. And at the end of the second half, Derek Carr throws the pick on the floater. Yes, he got hit, ladies and gentlemen, but he could have very easily just gone down and taken the 3 points. And the Raiders, if it ends up like it did, they may win that game, most likely win the game. When you look at this performance, I mean, so many things, Mo, but what is top of mind for you as you look back at this as it's fresh?
Murph makes a good point, and it's a point that I've been making for the past few weeks. What's going to happen when Josh Jacobs is not 100%, can't go, has to take a few plays off? Do they have a second ball carrier to carry that weight and that momentum on the ground? Because even though the Raiders didn't have a great offensive night, they had been running the ball fairly well with Josh Jacobs. Now, let's say if he had a running mate there, maybe they've been able to sustain some of that momentum. Maybe they run the ball in the red zone instead of trying to throw the football. And of course, you bring up the point that Carr could have just taken the sack. I know it's not easy in a split-second decision, but as a quarterback, you can feel pressure in the pocket. And if Carr felt that pressure, he didn't have to force that ball in there. And as you said, if he takes the sack versus throwing the interception, takes 3 points, we're probably having a different conversation right now. But as you said, it's not all on Carr. I know people want to take my tweet out of context and say I'm blaming Carr because I said Baker Mayfield had a better game. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is for a quarterback who just met his teammates 2 days ago,
it's remarkable.
He had a better game.
Heard that.
Right.
Yeah.
He had a
couple days ago. Well, they completely omitted that from the broadcast.
Right. They just got him in, claimed him. We didn't know if he was going to play or not. Yeah. John Wolford comes in, hands the ball 3 times. It's Baker Mayfield time. He has some chunk plays coming off the sideline, and then takes his team down the field with the help of some penalties. But he makes a big play to Van Jefferson to close out the deal. So you got to give Baker Mayfield credit for that. Raiders defense, penalties, play calling, Derek Carr, all not good, bad. And this is what you get, 5-8 in the terrible nut punching loss.
Yes, definitely one in the nads. Baker Mayfield, 22 of 35, 230 yards, a touchdown, a passer rating of 91.4. Derek Carr, 11 of 20, 137 yards, 2 interceptions, and a rating of 36.9. I don't know that he's had one worse than that, maybe once in the year. And again, not all his fault. I mean, Murph, you look at down the stretch, especially in the third and fourth quarter, the Raiders continued to give the Rams opportunities. So yes, it was self-inflicted wounds. The punt and the offsides penalty on the punt. Then even Max Crosby, again, who had a great game, and everybody knows that Max Crosby, to me, Defensive Player of the Year right now, still in the NFL, gets offside there on the key drive towards the end of the game. This team just seemed on the short week not to be focused, the coaching as well. But on defense, look, as bad as the defense got beat at the end there, remember, until that point, they had given up 10 points. But it just seems the discipline and the focus weren't there on this entire team.
Yeah, and also too, like, let's not forget, like, the Max Crosby. I mean, can that guy get mugged one more time by the right tackle? Like, I mean, how many times? And I know we're Raider fan and we're supposed to be used to it, and I get it. Like, let's not act brand new. Like, we don't get calls and we get calls against us, but my gosh, I mean, these are like egregious freaking holding calls, like coming around the guy's neck and coming around his chest. Like, I can't. It blows my mind that we don't get those kinds of calls. But to the greater, commentary around the second half, they came out and they fell flat, Scott. But early on in the game, that's what, like, yes, it was a short week, but early on in the game, we were dominating. I mean, we saw the very first drive. We've been talking about how many weeks now we've been complimenting Derek and Davante on their timing. On the amazing last second adjustment that it's not even it's shorter than a second that Davante adjusts to the ball, catches it one-handed while he's being held. Like, we see these amazing plays. We march right down. We score a touchdown on the first offensive play. Like, things are freaking firing on all cylinders to start this football game off. And then what happens? A quarter and a half in, or at a minimum in the second half, we just completely turned into a different football team. Yeah. We turned into the Raiders of week 2 and 3. Like, it blows my mind how I thought we were past that. That was the thing about, and I say all the time when the Raiders are on a path of decline, thanks for relieving me of the burden of expectation. But just like a sucker, I freaking bought in again because we had 3 in a row. And I was thinking, okay, here's this great pathway for us to make it a season. That sure enough, we go all the way back to doing what we were doing earlier in the year. And it's like, I thought we were past it. I thought we were better than that, Raiders. But again, one Josh Jacobs injury, and then the whole thing falls apart. Like, so I don't know, like that. If that's this house of cards is, then we need to move on to something else, because this isn't going to work.
Well, and guys, I mean, I think, and Mo, you can comment on this too. The big success that the Raiders have had over the previous 3 weeks on the little mini win streak was they were playing complementary football. You had better defense, you had better offense. I mean, great offense with Josh Jacobs and Davante Adams, the numbers they were putting up. And then you get out there tonight on a national stage again, and there's no complimentary football. Again, you don't just blame the offense for the loss, but the offense couldn't get anything going. They just could not get it going, to your point about Josh Jacobs. Then, one thing too, and I'm not making excuses, because you guys know I don't make excuses, but you lose 2 offensive linemen as well. You lose Alex Bars first. I know it seems crazy that Alex Bars doesn't seem like he's some big loss, but I will tell you that line had been playing cohesive again for the last 3 weeks, played really, really well, including Bars, and suddenly he's out. And it seemed like after Alex Bars got hurt, Now, they didn't pressure Derek Carr a lot. Again, not a sack tonight. Again, not a sack. So they played well, but it just seemed as though everything got mixed up again, and this team could not play that complementary football.
I don't understand what is the issue with Josh McDaniels' play calling when he gets a big lead.
Yeah,
it's kind of like he just takes his foot off the pedal and he throws and he calls a run play when he should pass, calls a pass play when he should run. He just gets all discombobulated when the Raiders have a 2-3 possession lead. And I don't know what it is, but this is now they blew a 13-point lead tonight. So this is the fourth 13+ point lead they've blown. Of course, they had a 17-17 and a 20 early in the season. So I don't know what is it with Josh McDaniels and how he sees the game once the Raiders have a big advantage, but it's not good, and it's something he's going to have to address and look in the mirror at himself at.
Yeah, he will have to. And I was just blown away by, again, you go back to when they were really struggling, where you have a 3rd and 2 and you're going for a 40-yard pass. Or you have a 3rd and 6 and you're throwing behind the line of scrimmage. Like that's what we saw again tonight. And I don't know why, to your point, Mo, they built a lead, but even before that, they kind of were doing that. And I just don't get what they're doing. And yes, they're still missing Waller and they're still missing Renfro. And we have some people in the chat up on YouTube saying, well, is it his fault they should have gotten Waller out there? Not on a short week. That was never going to happen. It's not a good idea. And they didn't listen. If they execute like they had executed the previous 3 weeks, Murph, this team, I mean, it should have been maybe 28-3 at halftime, and we're talking about a different type of game at least. And I know the jokes about blowing leads will come up, but still, this just feels like a different game. But offensively, they just never got in sync outside that first drive, except for Josh Jacobs, of course.
And I think that's the part that's the biggest letdown. You know, we spent the last couple of days here at Raiders Fan Radio talking about the significance of not only Josh Jacobs, but Davante Adams and their collective, contribution to the Raiders offense. And Josh Jacobs is in some categories putting himself up to this game, has put himself in the conversation with Jim Brown, Walter Payton, O.J. Simpson, the collective of those two guys of Davante and Josh, putting themselves in the conversation with Edgerrin James and Marvin Harrison in terms of and many, many others that I'll save you all the breakdown on. But they're putting themselves in conversation with not only all-time Raider greats, like Josh Jacobs is the greatest running back through 12 games of any Raider we've ever seen. And then him by himself in Raider history, or Raider in NFL history, and then Davante and him in Raider and NFL history. So what they were doing statistically but what they've done, especially in these last 3 games, has been literally unprecedented in the silver and black. So then today, to then go into this game and then just completely fall apart, like that's the stuff that I think that hurts most, Scott. Like what you're saying is that like we were on like the ultimate freaking like ramp up here, and then you've just fallen off a freaking cliff. And it wasn't just one thing. It wasn't just, and again, that's another thing that's tough. And it circles back to what we were talking about in the very beginning. But it's not just McDaniels. It's not just the offense. It's not just the defense. It's just like this collection of things that just ultimately showed up in the most Raidery way possible on a Thursday night.
Yeah. We're going to hit our first break. For those of you listening on audio, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come right back. For those on video, stick tight. We'll be back. You're listening to Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. Raiders 17-16 losers in Los Angeles to the Rams on a last-second touchdown. Baker Mayfield is the star of the night. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back. Welcome back. Silver and Black today. Raiders 17-16 losers to the Los Angeles Rams. Again, do us a favor, subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it. Just search Silver and Black today wherever you get it, and you'll be able to do that. We appreciate you doing that. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit the subscription and the notifications bell. And thanks to all the people in the chat and getting out all that aggression and fun and everything you have to say. We appreciate you being there. I am, of course, joined, as I am always on the post-game show, with Murf from Raiders Fan Radio and my broadcast partner, Moe Moton. He's a national NFL writer at Bleacher Report and also the Raiders columnist up at sportsnot.com. Guys, I'm going to start here with the offense. We'll get into the penalties and the defense in a second, but you look at the Raiders. The Raiders had you ready? They had 2 first downs in the second half. 2 first downs in the second half. And here you go back to and this is where Mo and I know we're arguing with some folks, Murph, on Twitter about the Carr interception at the end of the first half. After the Carr interception, and going into the second half, the Raiders, 2 third quarter possessions, both were punts. Okay. One possession netted -10 yards. The other possession netted 0 yards. Then in the fourth quarter, they had a field goal, a punt, and the interception, of course, to end the game. It's hard when even your defense at that point had given up 3 and then 10 points, or 6 points, I should say. And you can't get the ball downfield. You have Davante Adams. It didn't seem there were a couple miscues to him, Moe and Murph. But again, it seemed like it got lost again, and the play calling and Derek Carr not being in sync, it all seemed to combine for just a complete shutdown and dysfunction on offense again.
Yeah, I think I gotta pin that on. Obviously, we got to pin on Josh McDaniels because he's the offensive coordinator, because we don't know what Mick Lombardi does. But but the idea that like Josh Jacobs goes down and then like you lose all your ability to be creative on play calling. We saw in the first half, we saw that Amir Abdullah screenplay come back to life. That thing that we saw in the preseason, and we've seen sporadically throughout the season, but not much. But how many times, like if that wasn't the most Patriots offensive play ever, like that's what they do. And we did it to success. Well, where did he go? Like, and if Josh Jacobs is that injured and that much of a liability, then why is he in the game? Like, why keep forcing that to him? And why keep, and I get that he's a warrior and he's the guy, and that's no disrespect to Josh Jacobs and his want to be on the field. But as a coaching staff, like, don't you gotta, at that point, if you're this mad genius that we all suspect that he is, and he has shown that he is, then wouldn't you find a way to adjust within that? And again, I don't know all the X's and O's and the details of their play calling, but I will say this, clearly it was ineffective. Because we were, I mean, like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a fan in their freaking bonus room to figure that out, man. I mean, it was a freaking disaster in the second half.
It was. Mo, what did you see on off? I mean, the play calling, clearly fans not happy with that, but there was also a lack of execution from the players. Again, total team loss, not blame on one person or one unit. But what did you see outside of the play calling? You talked about the Josh Jacobs, the dependency there. They got Zamir White in there. They ran him a few times, but with a running back, as you know, as you cover the whole league, it's important for a running back to get enough carries where you kind of get into a rhythm of the game and you start to feel it, so to speak. They never had that chance. Once Josh Jacobs was hurt and he hurt the finger, it never seemed like they fully committed. They rather have Jacobs out there, whether he was as effective as before or not. What did you see overall with that offense?
I just didn't see any rhythm. Not any urgency, but I just didn't see any rhythm, from Carr to his connection with Adams, to Josh Jacobs, to the run game, to the offensive line losing two starters. Their Raiders offense just lost complete momentum coming out of halftime. And as you said, 2 punts in the third quarter and kicked the field goal late. But I mean, it's just mind-boggling, because like Murph, I'm sitting and I'm watching the game and I'm thinking, okay, the Rams have one chance to basically win this football game. The Raiders are now kind of on the ropes, but they still have a lead. The Rams have to go all the way downfield, like 98 yards. I know it happens to the Raiders so often where they fall apart and crumble, but the defense has to come up with a stop here, because Baker Mayfield is 2 days off of a plane, doesn't know his teammates. They get off the field and we get on with Murph and we say, okay, it was an ugly win, but it was a win. And then I'm thinking in my head, these are the Raiders. And I had a tweet to Vic Tafur earlier today. Vic Tafur said, this should be a gimme game for the Raiders. That's what he said. Yes. And I laughed to myself, because I was like, Vic, and all respect to Vic at The Athletic. Great guy, great reporter. I've been following for years. I rock with Vic. But when I saw that tweet, I laughed and I immediately said, Vic, you've been covering this team for how long? You know, the games that seem quote unquote easy, or these gimme games, they never turn into gimme games for the Raiders. The Raiders will find creative ways to make things difficult or overly dramatic when they don't have to be. Now, I get these professionals, but the Raiders, for them to collapse the way they did tonight, just puts it up there with the all-time hurtful losses for Raider fans out there. And it's just, what I saw out there was, we talk about body language a lot. I just didn't see a team that had the energy of a team that came into this with 3 straight victories. I saw a team that kind of looked defeated. And it was weird to see, because the Raiders came into this game favored. They have Davante Adams, Josh Jacobs. I know he's in and out the game, but he's still available. And to look defeated against a Rams team who's downtrodden with all of these injuries, no Matthew Stafford, no Cooper Kupp, no Aaron Donald, to collapse like that, it's just, to me, it's inexcusable.
Yeah, and by the way, for the folks in the YouTube chat, I'm glad you're getting it all out. Let's be respectful there a little bit. So I've had to hide some people because they're spamming the page. But anyway, absolutely. I mean, I didn't see any urgency, Murph. It seemed as though it really felt like 6 weeks ago. I mean, it really did in every facet of the game. Yes, the defense played better at the beginning. Of course, you saw Chandler Jones with the big fumble, right, to knock the ball out. Cam Akers was a great play. And you're like, okay, this is the defense we've seen over the last 3 weeks. And then the backside of the defense isn't good, but they also did not get as much pressure in there, especially with Baker Mayfield in there, to really give that defensive backfield, which is deficient of talent. It just is. They didn't really give him a chance back there.
Now, the most urgency we saw all night was the Amazon Prime folks rushing to play NWA after the first freaking Rams touchdown, which is an ultimate slap in the face to Raider fan, if you ask me. But you know, it's interesting. Like, and as I'm listening to you know, y'all break down some of these things, and I'm looking at my notes here. It's such a division. Like, the first half of my notes are so positive. There's so many things good that happened defensively and offensively, but even defensively, you know, Cleveland Farrell showing up early. You know, you mentioned Chandler Jones with that peanut punch. Again, that's a second week in a row that we've seen that. We saw Bilal Nichols with pressure in the sack. That almost created a turnover. Like, where does all that go? Like, and you know, again, I divert to the football minds. Like, what is it about? Is that Patrick Graham? Is that an overall collective? Is that a sideline culture thing? Like, what is the deal? Like, why is it that we have this intensity and this focus to create plays early on in the game, and then it just completely goes away in the second half?
Mo?
I really can't answer that on Murph, but there's an issue with momentum, and it seems like when it crumbles for the Raiders, it crumbles all the way through. There is no, like, okay, we have a down stretch and then we can bounce back. A lot of players and coaches like to use the word resilient after wins, especially when they're down and they come back or they have to go through some adversity during the game. And through the years, we've said, and I'm sure all of us said, the Raiders have resiliency. They're a very resilient team. But to me, under Josh McDaniels right now, and I know it's early in his tenure, when things are down, things are really down for them. And I know I know they've hung in games, and I know you're going to bring up the stat about one possession games, and they've stuck into all these games. But I say this again: a lot of those one possession games the Raiders have been in shouldn't have been one possession games. Yeah, they're games that the Raiders should have put away, and that was the case tonight. They should have put it away early in the first half, and they didn't.
Yeah, and again, plenty of blame to go around, but I see a lot in the chat, and I have to agree. There's several people saying this is. When the Raiders seem to struggle, knowing where that defense is at, it always seems to be when the offense just can't get it going. I mean, you're talking about 2 first downs in the second. How many NFL games can you win with 2 first downs in the second half? So Josh McDaniels, I don't know what his play calling, why he doesn't go. Kelly Kreiner, our good buddies in the chat, saying that it's because McDaniels doesn't trust his quarterback. I don't know. There could be something to that to a certain degree, but at the same time, even when they are throwing the ball, it doesn't seem as though the execution is there. And I just don't understand, Murph, how the team can come out with no energy when you kind of have to win out to make it in the playoffs. So if you go down in a hard fought battle and you lose 17-16, but it's back and forth and it's executed well. Okay, fine. That's the way it goes sometimes. But to come out and I just saw a lack of energy across the board.
Yeah, so this is, I think we just set an NFL record, not a good one. Are we now the first team that's blown 4 13-plus point leads in a season?
Maybe.
I think so. So, I mean, and then to go to answer the question about him not trusting Derek or Josh McDaniels not trusting Derek. I don't know. I mean, we saw Derek execute some killer plays in the first half. That dime that he threw to Davante just past Jalen Ramsey was amazing. That was an incredible pass that we saw. that little flip that we saw him do to Mac Hollins, like that super like casual little toss thing that he did. Like that was an incredible play. We saw some really, I mean, you got to trust your quarterback a whole heck of a lot to fake it to one guy and like basically do like a no look toss to the other guy running around. So I mean, so I wouldn't say that he doesn't trust his quarterback. I don't buy into that, but I'm certainly not going to be a Derek Carr apologist in this one because again, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of plays that Derek would want back, but then again, all it does is just funnel into the broader conversation of that there are so many things that went wrong. You can't necessarily pin it down to one singular thing. So I think that, sure, could we address and say Derek could have been better in the second half? Yes. Could the running game been better? Could the offensive line been better? Like there could be a million things that could have went better in the second half. And yeah, that was just. Sorry, guys, I'm a disaster tonight. I mean, all of my
That's
feelings.
okay. That's why you're here, Murph. That's why you're here. We want the fans to speak.
But I just want to bring up one thing. Davante Adams, 7 targets tonight.
7.
Do you think that's enough? I get it. The Raiders didn't have the ball out in the second half. I understand that. But 7 targets, I guess. I looked up the stats before I got on here. The Rams, I know Jalen Ramsey's out there, but the Rams had a bottom half pass defense coming into this. Their run defense was a lot better than their pass defense. 7 targets for Davante Adams.
Right.
Is that something that is that mean that he was, you know, is he written into the play calling there and Derek is missing him, or is that something that or is that on Josh McDaniels trying to get too cute and because we know that like we've seen him not feature Davante in a whole quarter before just in order to get Josh Jacobs going. And then all of a sudden Davante Adams lights it up. Is that something, guys, Scott and Moe, is that what was going on here? Like, why else would you go away from the best receiver in all of football, the guy that is absolutely killing it in the last 3 games?
Right.
Murph, I have a response to that. If you can drop all these wide receiver reverses for Matt Collins to get him the football, you can drop some plays to get Davante Adams, your best offensive playmaker on the perimeter of the football. If you could do it for Mac on a run, you could do it for Davante in the passing game. So I don't want to give any excuses to Josh McDaniels for not getting his best player involved at that point, his best receiver involved at that point, Derek Carr for not getting the ball to him. But something is amiss there for Davante Adams to come out of a game where you see the momentum shifting toward the Rams, and Davante Adams finishes with 7 targets. To me, that's a questionable statistic right there.
Yeah, and I think that is absolutely coaching. I mean, Mo, to bring up the numbers, and I'm looking at them right here. Like you said, 7 targets, 3 receptions. 3 receptions, right? Not only that, but you look at the rest. So Derek Carr only threw 20 passes. Now, we know they didn't have many possessions. That's part of the problem because they couldn't get first downs in the second half. Right. But you're talking about 7 targets, 3 receptions. Mac Hollins had 4 targets, 2 receptions. Then past that, 2 receptions for Abdullah, 2 receptions for Josh Jacobs, 1 for Keelan Cole, and 1 for Johnson. Foster Moreau had 1 target, no catches. They didn't involve the tight end in the game plan at all. I didn't see any of the play. We see it every game, the tight end involved at least 3, 4, without Darren Waller, of course, 3, 4, 5, 6 targets to Foster Moreau. They had 1 today. He was invisible in this game. I don't know why, especially to your point about the Rams pass defense outside of Jalen Ramsey, and even he got burned by Davante Adams early, is not very good. To take the tight end and send them over the middle on those 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 2s, again, it goes back to coaching. To me, Derek Carr, I don't care if you're running the hell out of the ball like we've seen the last 3 weeks, you have to throw more than 20 passes. But again, you have to get first downs too.
Take it, Mo.
Mo's like, he's like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'm just, it just amazes me that, you know, I bet you if you look on the Twitterverse right now, this is what Twitter does. They're just looking for one person to blame. So there's going to be a portion of fans that are going to say it's Josh McDaniels' fault. They're going to be a portion of fans that say it's Derek Carr's fault. They're going to be a portion of, you know, those are the 2 factions right now. And they're going to be a portion of fans say the defense gave it up in the second half and the penalties. And I get it. Amik Robertson, the pass interference, and Jerry Tillery, the penalty. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, I completely not in my head that knocking the ball out of the quarterback's hand was a penalty until it popped up. I was like, oh yeah, that's a penalty. But it you know, letter of the law type of thing. But
sure it is.
This is not. I know fans do this, and they're going to do this anyway. But to me, this is another one of those.
I resemble that remark.
Except Murph. Murph, you're in a different league. You're a different breed of fan. But it's not just one person. It's just this collective I don't know what it is with the Raiders, but as I said, when things go bad, they just seem to slide downhill on both sides of the ball, even with the play calling,
right?
The penalties. It's just everything rolled into one, and I don't know what it is. But the Raiders have to figure it out this year, and they're probably not going to make the playoffs this year, but barring some slides from other teams in the miracle. But they have to understand that when the momentum slides, they need some energy in the side, somebody to pick those guys up and say, "Look, we're still going to win this freaking game."
Right.
I don't think they have that right now.
No, and I think, well, I know some people will take this the wrong way, but you have almost a 10-year quarterback there too. I think he should be one. You have guys, Max Crosby on defense. You have guys there who should do that, who should come out and say, all right, let's pick this up. Let's get this going. By the way, Skips 1904 in the YouTube chat says, amazing you all continue to only blame the defense. I don't think you were here for the first segment, Skip, when we talked about the lack of complimentary football, my friend. And the fact that they only got 2 first downs in the second half. So I know some people drop in and drop out of the broadcast, but no, that's not the case. There's plenty of blame to go all the way around. But yeah, the lack of intensity, again, we thought that this team had gotten over the hump with the coaching staff and that they kind of had figured that out and they put it together. Even on the broadcast, Murph, they talked at the beginning about the Derek Carr meltdown at the press conference after the Colts loss and how that seemed to bring everybody together. And then today, it's like it never happened.
Yeah, that was a huge focus of their broadcast. They really locked into that idea that Derek had this emotional press conference, and we've all talked about it, individually and on our collective shows about how that's when things changed. That seemingly for whatever happened inside the locker room, whatever happened inside the organization, that changed the momentum of this team for this season when Derek had the, and we had Jonathan Abram get let go, and we had a handful of things happen, and we saw improvement on the team. I'm going to pin it all on John Abram, but Merrick's performance and his play improved when he was lined up next to Duron Harmon and not Jonathan Abram. So we saw things happen, and there were a few things that were definitive where it was okay, this changed the trajectory of this season. And that's why I think we were so all bought in, because you're right. We've talked. I mean, I feel like for the majority of the shows I've done with you guys, we've talked about the negative body language, the kind of the droopy, woe is me, it's all on me, oh shucks, we'll get them next time kind of nature of the Raiders this year. But then seemingly it changed after that moment, after Derek had that emotional moment at the podium. They highlighted it, and then isn't it funny? And I don't know, I'd have to go back and watch it, but it feels like as soon as they highlighted that, that's when it all freaking went downhill, man. It was right after that was like, hey, look, here's some good that's happening to the Raiders. And then here we go, right on down.
All right, we're going to take our last break for those of you on audio. For those of you on YouTube, hold on just for a second. We'll be right back. And don't forget, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and wherever you get it, wherever you get the audio. If you watch us on YouTube, thank you. And we appreciate the chats going crazy, but also subscribe to us on the audio side. We would appreciate that. We'll be back right after this. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back. Silver and Black today, the post-game edition. We are lamenting the Raiders' 17-16 loss. The 98-yard drive that ended in a touchdown. Baker Mayfield leads the Rams. He gets off the plane at LAX 2 days ago, doesn't know the playbook, and leads his team on a 98-yard drive to win the game. Of course, with me, as always, is Murf from Raiders Fan Radio. He's our voice of the fan tonight, as he always is on our postgame show. And my partner, always here on the podcast, is Moe Moton. He's a national NFL writer for Bleacher Report. So the other thing I want to get to, because I know, and Murph, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but the fans that are blaming the referees, I just don't have it tonight. I have some in the chat. I'm like, look, did Max Crosby get held more than he should have? Absolutely. Every game he does. He's the best defensive end in football right now. So guess what they're going to do? I mean, they got the guy on the Rams that was literally choking him by the throat, and it got called maybe once out of 5 times. So I get that. But when you only get 2 first downs in the second half and you can't score, you're not going to win many football games.
No, and listen, I've seen the calendar turn enough and been around this Raider team long enough to tell you that look, this is just something that happens to the Raiders. And if you ask OG Raider fan, guys like my dad, guys like my uncles that raised me up in this whole Raider thing and watched the Raiders from their inception in the 60s and all throughout the 70s. And when Al Davis ran aground with the NFL, we didn't get calls back then. Like it all started. I mean, you could go back to calls against the Jets. You could go back to Rob Lytle's non-fumble. Of course, the Immaculate Deception. You could go back. There's literally games, historical games named after calls that have gone against the Raiders. But those guys will also tell you this, that we used to win anyways. Yeah. And that's the important thing, is that we got to remember that it's not just against us. You guys remember when the Saints lost in the NFC Championship a few years back?
Talk about Rams.
Screwed on a freaking call, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just us that happens to. Has it happened to us more frequently? Yes. Is there a conspiracy against the Raiders? I don't think so. Is there a bias? Maybe back in the day, but I think we've evaporated that at this point. But I will tell you this, Raider Nation, is that when your team is good, those little adversities that pop up along the way, like those calls against Max, because what Scott said is so dead on. He's one of, if not the best edge rusher in football. So yeah, he's going to get held, and especially by a guy that's under-equipped to play against him, like some freaking chump-ass sorry, guys.
That's okay.
Dude that's playing, tackle that normally wouldn't be. So he's got to do those things in order to be effective. So I will say this, is I don't disagree with that sentiment, Raider Nation, but we got to get past that. We can't blame the calls. We can't blame the officials. It ain't Walt Coleman and Gene Steratore out there officiating every single game for us. So we got to move past it and realize that there are things that we can do to control the output of the game. Absolutely. And the final score on the scoreboard. And the Raiders completely did not do that in the second half of this game. Did those calls cost us a game? No. Would have allowed us to be in a more favorable position to win? Sure. Because if we would have got those holding calls, and maybe would have ended some of those drives. But that's not why we lost. 2 first downs in the second half is why we freaking lost the football game.
Yeah, and not only that, Mo, 25% in the red zone again. I don't know that this team ever finishes above 40% in the red zone, which brings up a question. And again, this and again, Mo, this brings up a question I'm seeing a lot in the chat. And I'm going to ask it because you've been very vocal that, hey, you say, look, Derek Carr's going to be back next year. But the Raiders, is it coincidence that over the last 10 years they've been horrible in the red zone? Is it because of bad coaching? All 6 coaches that Derek Carr has had have been poor at red zone coaching? Or is there something there that points to the quarterback and his inability to get his team into the end zone?
I'll say it this way, right? It's tough in the red zone. I don't want to get up here and say it's easy to throw a complete pass in the red zone. If you look at all quarterbacks across the league, their numbers tend to taper off once they get to the red zone, throwing in the red zone, because it's close quarters there, a lot of bodies in tight spots. So you have to make great decisions once you're inside the 20. But I will also say this, that a lot of times we look at Derek Carr and he throws a pass and we're like, either what is he thinking? Sometimes it's on the pass catcher. Sometimes the receiver just has to come up with the ball. I remember Darren Waller early in the season had a drop in the red zone. So that's on him. But in this situation, we're thinking about it today, looking at it today. And I want to go back to the play at the end of the first half with Derek Carr's interception. And someone posted a photo shot of, Derek Carr was hit in the pocket. I get it. His guard got pushed back into him and it caused him to float that pass. But as I said, if you're a quarterback in the pocket and you have a good feel for pressure, and what's been a criticism of Carr throughout his years, sometimes he loses a feel for the pocket. Sometimes he anticipates pressure that isn't there. Sometimes he doesn't feel the pressure that's around him. And I think in that moment, you have to just make a better decision. And again, I'm not blaming the loss on Derek Carr, but when it comes to the Raiders' red zone woes, he has to be part of that equation. You can't completely absolve the quarterback of your team's red zone woes.
Yeah, and you said it's hard to score in the red zone, and Kelly in the chat says it isn't hard to score in the red zone against the Raiders.
That's true.
32 of 32 on goal-to-goes over the last several years for the Raiders. That's pretty incredible.
Can I make a
yeah, go ahead, please.
Yep. You know what, Mo? I think that's an incredible salient point, and I think that what's tough for us Raider fans is that when we look historically at what the greatest Raider quarterbacks have done, with and you obviously Stabler is the poster child for that. You can put up Gannon up there, obviously Plunkett, not in terms of fourth quarter wins per se, but anyways, but in the red zone, what is Kenny Stabler famous for? The sea of hands, right? Things like that. It's like these incredibly high profile improv plays that literally become defined in NFL history. Then we look at Derek Carr. I'm going to go back to last year, and I'm not choosing this to pick on Derek Carr, but I will just say this. We had 4 plays inside the 10-yard line against the Bengals to win a playoff game. And there were there was 1 interception, 2 incompletions, and a spike pass or a spike down. So and that interception was thrown short of the goal line. I think that's what you're saying, and I think that is incredibly great point. That that's not play calling. I don't think anybody's calling Zay Jones to run a route 2 yards shy of the goal line on 4th down, but yet that's what the play was, or that's what the pass was. So as much as I can, people accuse me of being a bootlicker and an apologist, and all that stuff. Derek Carr owns a lot of this, and last year it was completely evident that he does suffer in the red zone, and we saw it again tonight.
Yeah, no, and again, I think too, we talk about penalties. The Raiders over the last 3 weeks during the win streak were keeping penalties to a minimum, especially penalties that came at crucial times of the game or in drives. And tonight they made the opposite. They made crucial penalties at the wrong time. And for a lot of the people complaining about the Tillery penalty, and listen, I would be a Tillery apologist because he went to Notre Dame. But other than that play, listen, at a big moment in the game, your offense can't score. They can't score. And the Rams get one more shot to get the ball and go 98 yards, right, to win the game. So what do you have to do? You have to keep your head. You can't do stupid crap. And he did. And this goes back to what we saw during their rough start, right, Mo, which was we saw during the preseason an incredibly disciplined team, it looked like. You and I talked a lot about it on the show. And then they got in the regular season, and that all went to pot. And they seemed to get better, and then all of a sudden tonight it goes away. Is that a new guy on the team? Yes, but then you had Cleveland Ferrell with the bad penalty, and of course Max Crosby with the offside. He cannot be excused for that. I don't care how good he is. At that time, you can't jump and create a first down on a drive that could mean the game for you.
I just think that last drive between Jerry Tillery's penalty and Amik Robinson's defensive pass interference, it's just at that point, after those 2 penalties, I was like, oh gosh, here we go. Either the Rays are going to lose this game, or they're going to make this unreasonably uncomfortable for their fans, because you can almost see it. And I think we talked about this with Murph early in the season. You can almost see when the avalanche is happening. You could see when it's starting to roll back for Rays, and you're like, okay, they have to get a stop or something here, or this is just going to completely snowball in the other team's favor. And it happened again tonight. And I can't explain it, but it just happens to the Raiders. And you can see it happen. You can sense it when the momentum shifts. The Raiders just cannot get it back.
No, they can't get it back. And then to me, I don't know what it is. And you have to look to coach. Yes, the players are responsible. There's no question. They have to keep their intensity. They have to execute on the field. So you want to blame coaching for all of it? Okay, no, you can blame coaching for culture. I definitely agree with that. And I don't know what happened between last week and this week, Murph, where suddenly, I don't know, was it because it was a short week and they got out of the rhythm they were in? I don't know, but that's kind of the coaching staff's job, is to keep them focused. They had everybody pretty much. Yes, they had some injuries on defense, which I think did hurt them, especially up front as well. But there's no excuse for that. There's no excuse when you have no margin for error and you come out seemingly after the first drive, which was scripted, flat.
That's the part that's so tough to understand. And we saw, Derek in the post game locker room after the big win against the Chargers. He said it, look, get your body right, get home. This was great, and I'm paraphrasing, but this was great, but we're all going to feel like crap on Thursday if we don't take care of business. And that was the focus. And you could hear the collective of the team, buying into that. So where did that go? And I'm with you, Mo, in terms of when this thing starts sliding downhill, I don't understand why the Raiders have such a trouble over many years now to snap out of that. I mean, other than certain occasions in like 2016 or whatever. Yeah. But it's like me having a bad night at the crap table at the Mirage. It's like, no, I'm going to get it on this one. No, you're not. Go to bed. You know what I mean? But like for whatever reason, we just stay in there and just until everything's gone, and then it's time to go home or whatever. But anyways, but point being that I'm with you, man. I don't know how it just seems to completely snowball, and there's no momentum there. And that is to go back to your point, Scott. I don't understand it either, and I don't. And listen, I have a freaking degree in leadership, like, and it's still hard for me to comprehend the idea that like the culture of your organization can shift weekly, or not even this point weekly. It's daily, so dramatically that point, like at some point you drop back to your leaders. But when you have multiple leaders, it's like you hold them all accountable. I think you have to, because there's not one person dependent on. And I know. And I can't even read the chat, but like chat room, YouTube comments, people on Twitter, whatever, you want to find someone to blame. Like that's what we want to, as people, we want to go, well, it's this person's fault. Well, sometimes it's not one person's fault. It's not Mark Davis's fault individually. It's not Josh McDaniels. It's not Derek Carr. It's not whoever else you want to try to pin it on. Sometimes it's a collective, and sometimes in order to change the collective, you need time. Like you can't just shift it all in one moment. So. And I hate to be the guy that says like, well, let's be patient, because it sure I think that's what we're forced to do, right?
Yeah, not with 4 weeks left in the season. And speaking of that, Mo, the Raiders have four games left. Okay, so they have to do. You continue. It's professional football. It's all about wins, and nothing else really matters at this level except for winning. But this team is not mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, but in all likelihood, that would be just a miracle if that happened. If they were able to somehow get in the playoffs, including winning out the next 4 games. But after this big step back. What are your biggest concerns the rest of the way with this team and how they've performed, and how the coaching seems to have gone backwards too?
I shouldn't say this, but I'm worried about certain players checking out. Because we're talking about their playoff chances, and I understand some players are playing for their careers and they're playing for new jobs next year. But sometimes and we'll see what happens coming off this mini bye. How do the Raiders respond after a bad loss, knowing that the probability of them making the playoffs are very, very slim? Are some guys going to start to pack it in and get even more sloppy? Or are they going to lock in and say, look, we're going to control what we can control and just win these games, and whatever happens at the end of the season happens? I want to see how this team responds to that, because this is new territory under Josh McDaniels. Now, last year they were 6-7 and they went on a run. This year they're 5-8. Even if they go on a run, playoffs still slim. So I want to see how a lot of those guys, especially guys that may not be there next year, I want to see how those guys respond to this loss. And I think that'll answer a lot of questions as far as Dave Ziegler is concerned. Who stays and who goes as far as guys on the fringe? How do they play down the stretch when they know the playoffs may not happen for them?
Well, and Murph, you touched on it, and you and I have talked about it many, many times on the post-game show this year, and that is the term leadership. And not only, as Mo mentioned, does this organization have to look at the talent on the field and decide who's going to be there, who isn't, but you're also going to learn from a leadership standpoint and from a culture standpoint, because they are remaking the culture. So you knew there would be bumps in the road, right, guys? You knew that it would take some time. Now, we thought they had kind of gone through those bumps and things were smoothing out a little bit now. And I thought, listen, I wasn't realistically thinking the Raiders, and I've said this before, we're going to win out. I know, Murph, you always go into a week saying, yes, they're going to win out. But I was saying, no, okay, but if they don't win out, that's fine. As long as they continue to improve. From a culture and a leadership standpoint, though, they're going to have to also look at that. You might have a guy who's got talent, but he's not fitting in with the program, and that might make some difficult decisions for them as well.
Absolutely. That's an interesting question there. Interesting comment, Scott. And I have a couple co-hosts here in the fan cave, my best friend Swag Jeff and our best friend Michelle. And Michelle made a great point about this Raiders team and what they're going through this season and versus what it was last season, because we have had a lot of discussion around the culture of what the Raiders were last year. And then like this coaching staff and this new regime has said like, oh, we're here to change the culture. And we were like, well, wait, it wasn't bad before. Like we saw this team rally together. We saw them be resilient. We saw all that wonderful cohesion happen at the end of last year. Like, it wasn't broken. So what is this idea that you're coming in to change it? And Michelle made the point that like that cohesion happened because of external factors. There were things that happened outside the locker room, outside really the organization, that brought them together. And so that's not sustainable. You have to have internal cohesion. That's where he has to be motivated, has to come from self, right? And so that's what I think that we're going to be looking for in terms of the folks that are going to make decisions around the roster and whatnot around this team going forward, is that who then continues to then rise up or sustain throughout this most challenging time. Because this, like you said, this ain't going to happen. I mean, we could win out and it still ain't going to happen. But so who do we see? Who do we see rise up and show their leadership and show their ability to bring others along with them, to share their vision, to all those things that we know, build a great culture in an organization. Who are the players that are going to do that? And frankly, who are some of the coaches? Because I don't even know if we're set entirely on this coaching staff. I mean, probably, there's not going to be any major moves, but, there could be some lower level position coaches move. And so those are the things that are going to be under the highest of scrutiny now with 4 games left. And, again, we're not making the dang playoffs, but I'll just say that, I'm going to shut up. Wouldn't this be, now here we go. Here's the most Raider thing ever, right? You lose a freaking dumper to the freaking Rams at a home game in SoFi Stadium, and then now watch us run off the next 3 and then freaking take the Chiefs to the wire, beat them, end up freaking 9-8 on the season, and we're all going, yeah, baby, all we need is Ziggler with a hot stick, and here we go. And then we're back in the same boat again. My gosh.
Murph, thank God there's still people in the world with your enthusiasm and your optimism. Because we need some more of that. And I know the fans in the chat are all probably calling you nuts right now, but that's okay. We need that. So we appreciate it. By the way, make sure you follow Murph. You can see it on the screen there if you're watching us @_Murph. Also, Raiders Fan Radio on YouTube. They also have a podcast, so you can do that on the audio side as well. They are live on Wednesday nights, right? Still Wednesday night?
Yeah, Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific and 7 Eastern is when we always go live. Yeah.
Yes. So go make sure you check it out with Michelle and Swag Jeff as well. Great show. Murph, as always, man, we appreciate you being here.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you having me, and I'll see you next week. We go post game. So from the game we got flexed out of on Sunday night, but I'll see you live from Allegiant Stadium once again as we take on the Patriots and hopefully win.
That's right. You're going to be out there for Crab Fest. By the way, the One Nation Foundation, which Murph donates all the revenue he gets from the show, donates it back to the Blitnikoff Foundation. $10,000, right? That's what you're doing on December 16th?
Yeah, we're going to present a check to the Blitnikoffs for $10,000 on behalf of our listeners and all the wonderful folks that have donated to Raiders Fan Radio, and not Raiders Fan Radio, but the One Nation Foundation. Raiders Fan Radio is the vessel, and so anything we generate with Raiders Fan Radio, we give it to our nonprofit, and that's what we're going to issue that check to the One Nation Foundation. And thank you guys, appreciate you both very, very much, and you, Scott, for giving us this platform, because it's been an incredible boost to our success this year, and so can't thank you enough. And look forward to seeing if you're going to be in Vegas for the game against the Patriots. Holler at us, man. We'll see you out there.
It'll be good. It'll be fun. All right, Mo, before we check out of here for the night, just your final thoughts on where this team is. I mean, obviously the fans upset. I'm there's nothing I'm not going to tell Raider Nation. I'm not going to bring up positives tonight because it was such a rough night, and especially the way it ended. But in closing, your thoughts for Raider Nation as we head into this mini bye week.
I just want to give a shout out to Murph because he went into the penalties and not being a victim as a Raider fan.
Yeah.
And he went into the Derek Carr red zone woes. He took those bullets for me because I was going to touch on it, but he's the voice of the fans. So they won't go at Murph like they'll go at me. They'll curse me out on Twitter for those comments. They won't curse Murph out. So shout out to Murph for taking those bullets for me. But just going into the bye, I would just say, one game at a time. I know a lot of Raiders fans were coming into this game. They were saying we're just taking it one game at a time off this win streak. I think you have to have the same mentality going forward, because now not only is it an evaluation period, as Murph just brought up, as I just brought up about who's going to stay and who's going to go, but you're looking at this team and saying, okay, what are the pieces we're going to keep as we build this thing? Because I know fans don't want to hear this, but every week you're building a football team. You're trying to build a Super Bowl contender. And it doesn't stop even after the playoffs are kind of realistically out of reach. It continues. And actually it gets a lot tougher because now you're separating the contenders from the pretenders, like, okay, we can take this guy along with us in 2023 to build ourselves a playoff contender. We can't take this guy along with us. Look, his play has dropped off. He doesn't have the enthusiasm. He doesn't have the passion. He's lost it. We can't keep him. So this stretch, even though 9-8 is the best record the Raiders can get, is still very important. So keep it locked in with the Raiders.
It is, absolutely. And it's still your team, Raider Nation. So you got to follow them, even if you want to just curse them for the rest of the way.
Curse them tonight. Yeah,
exactly. Then that's all good. All right, Mo, we will next speak with you on Tuesday. Yes, we got a little bit of a longer weekend. I know you're working over the weekend, but with the show tonight, we've had a show Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and now Thursday. And so we'll be back on Tuesday. We'll kind of recap what happened over that mini bye weekend. We'll find out more about the Josh Jacobs injury. Is it going to be long-term? We'll also find out this week, Mo, if Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow are coming back for next week's game.
Absolutely. And I'll also say, Raider fans, I understand you're upset tonight, but just kind of woosah over the next few days. I also want to say rest in peace to my Raiders could mathematically win out and be 10-7 tweet. I tweeted that after every Raiders win on their 3-game streak, and I officially have to retire it. It's no longer mathematically possible, so I have to move off my 10-7 offseason prediction for the Raiders. Now the goal is to now finish with a winning record. We'll see what happens.
Winning record. We'll see how it all goes down. All right, my friend, I'll talk to you on Tuesday.
Absolutely.
All right. For Moe Moton, for Murf from Raiders Fan Radio, we appreciate you being with us. I am Scott Gulbransen. Make sure you follow Mo on Twitter as well, at Moe Moton, at MoeMoton. I am at LV Gully. For all the new subscribers out there, thanks for joining us. Saw a bunch of them on YouTube tonight. Got a couple notes as well for those of you subscribing tonight to the audio podcast. If you're listening to us on Friday, have a great weekend. We'll be back with you next week. And also, make sure you take care of one another out there. I know you're angry, but hang in there.